Hi there, guys. Welcome to another episode of the Uncast podcast. I'm your host, Ed, or you may know me as my alias, Space Invader 1. And I must say today, I'm really excited, and I say thumping in the chest excited, for a really exciting episode, because the man whose invention is buzzing through not only my server, my friends' servers, but probably most of you guys watching, his invention's buzzing through your servers as well. So yes, guys, today on the show, we're going to be chatting with the founder, CEO of Lime Technology, the brain behind the remarkable Unraid, Tom Mortensen, and also the co-CEO, Tiffany Jones. So thank you guys for taking the time to be with us today.
Thanks for having us, Ed.
Yeah, thanks, Ed.
You know, to the viewers and listeners out there, we're going to be diving into some really exciting updates today regarding Unraid and Lime Technology. And trust me, you're going to want to stick around to the end because there's some really exciting and important updates that you're going to want to hear. This is going to be a journey filled with insights, surprises, and news that you're going to want to hear firsthand. But before we jump into that, I think it'd be fun to kind of lighten things up a little bit. And I want to get to know Tom and Tiffany, asking them something I call quick fire questions. So, Tom, if it's all right, I'm going to start with you. You're going to be in the crosshairs first, and I'm going to start asking you some questions. So what I want you to do, please, is I'm going to ask you kind of questions that's pretty much just got an A or B answer. I want you to answer them as quick as you can. No kind of like thinking about it, just fire them off. Are you an early bird or a night owl?
Early bird and night owl. Can it be both?
You're meant to choose one, Tom. You're
Okay.
spoiling my format. Desktop or laptop?
Desktop. Although these days I'm mainly using a laptop.
And I'd say Mac or PC.
PC.
Standing desk or traditional desk?
Used to have a standing desk. Now it's a traditional desk.
And whilst you're working, do you like silence or do you like a little bit of background music?
Silence.
Not even music?
Hard to come by.
And coffee or tea?
Oh, coffee. Lots
I'm
of
not sure if you guys actually drink tea in the States, but are you a cat or a dog person? Cats or dogs?
Dogs. We've had, at one time we had 7 dogs. We're down to 1 now.
Wow, awesome. Wow, that is a lot of dogs. My mum also has a lot of dogs, so you definitely got on with her, I think. So, a very important question, Tom. Star Wars or Star Trek? You can tell a lot about a person with this answer, so be careful.
Okay, well, Star Trek. If I'm forced to choose, if I must pick, it's Star Wars.
Good answer.
Oh, there was a little slip there.
There's a slip there.
At least 50% of the audience will be happy with that.
Okay.
Pineapple on pizza, yes or no?
No way. Not on pizza.
Pineapple just in dessert, say. A bit of a sort of fun one. Would you rather have Iron Man's suit or Batman's gadgets if you had to choose one or the other?
Iron Man suit.
Yeah, good answer. I'd totally agree, but I do like Batman's gadgets too. And if you could travel in time, would you rather go back in the past or to the future?
Well, if I go in the future, it might end up being just a fireball somewhere. So I'm going to pick the past.
Yeah.
Optimist or pessimist?
Thanks very much, Tom. Don't worry, I won't give you any more, but Tiffany, it's going to be your turn now, please.
All right.
So again, no thinking or elaborating, Tiffany, please.
I promise I won't
fire off
think.
the answers.
Got it.
Right. Android or iOS?
iOS.
Your favorite browser?
Chrome.
Ebook or real book?
Oof. Damn it. The answer is yes, but I'll say ebook.
Right. And spontaneity or meticulous planning?
Can I answer that one for her?
Spontaneity.
No.
There's no elaborating here, so I just got to say it.
One app you couldn't live without?
The Reminders app. I live and die by the Reminders app on my phone.
And if you could choose city life or countryside?
Countryside.
Just the same as the last one I gave for Tom. Time travel, future or past?
Past. But
I
not
think,
because
I
the
think
future's a
Tom's
fireball, just to clarify.
Okay.
As with all the best stories, I guess let's start at the beginning. Obviously, our audience, they know Lime Technology and Unraid, but not everyone knows the story of the person behind it all. So, Tom, I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit, please, about your early years. Were there any specific incidents or influences in your childhood that hinted that you'd be venturing possibly into the world of tech and technology.
Wow. Back to the childhood, huh? Well, I grew up in San Jose, and I remember when I was in high school, I had a good friend, and we used to ride our bikes from South San Jose up to Santa Clara University. And at that time, they had a computer lab, but it just had it's just this room. It had like an HP 2000 in it, something like a PDP 11. And we used to sneak in there and write programs with punch cards, learn how to feed it into the punch card reader. And we got so good at doing this that the actual university students would come in and we'd be helping them. We'd be helping them, reboot the computer, debug their programs, and then we'd split back on our bikes and got out of there. So yeah, that was the first inkling, I guess.
How old would you figure you were back then, Tom?
I was a teenager, I guess. I don't know, 16, 17, probably 15. Yeah. It was before a car. So yeah, 15.
Yeah. Also, Tom, I believe before you formed Lime Technology, you were at a company called Maxstrat?
Correct.
If I'm correct, it was founded I'm not sure, was it in the early 90s or the mid-80s?
It was mid-80s. Yeah, like
mid-80s.
Late 80s, yeah.
And it specialized, I believe, in high-performance RAID storage systems.
Correct.
Didn't they have their product used by DreamWorks Inc. for the movie Prince of Egypt?
Yeah, so they, when Maxstrat in those days, in the late 80s, what they were mainly doing was storing video data from like the early CAT scan machines. Their initial product was just a video display device that would hook to the CAT scan, and the doctor could, adjust the contrast and all that. Later, we needed to add storage because it's digital data, and it was just a simple, we call it a RAID 0. But then in the late 80s, this guy, I think his name was Patterson from UC Berkeley, came out with a paper that talked about RAID, the different RAID levels. And I remember one of the founders of Maxstrat came and he's whiteboarding this out. So we created a RAID 5. And I think that, and I don't know this for sure, and I'm not trying to brag or anything, but I think it was the first commercial RAID 5 product. But it's very specialized. Then, the product was used in Disney. So I think what you're referring to was some of the early animation. When I say early, I saw Little Mermaid and Aladdin. We worked with Disney, and they used digital media to hard drives to store the animation. They would have an army of people in their IT staff in the morning. Well, all during the night, they'd be putting data onto these SGI workstations for animators to work on. And then in the evening, they'd have to take all the data off and shuffle it onto these disk arrays. So that's what we were doing. One of the things. Maxstrat also, we were involved with high performance computing, connecting to Cray supercomputers. And so for that purpose, we created large disk arrays in order to just increase the bandwidth. Yeah, I remember hitting 100 megabytes per second was such a huge deal. And with these large, like 8-inch hard drives, that's when I started really programming on purpose for disk arrays.
And so back then, how big were these disk arrays?
Gosh, it's hard.
What kind of size were they?
Okay, they were like, making me remember, huh? So I want to say there were like a couple hundred megabytes. Megabytes is all, not gigs. A couple hundred megabytes per disk. I think we had these huge cabinets. I'm trying to remember how many, probably 24 hard drives in various configurations.
How do you think your time there actually influenced or shaped your approach towards storage situations, and kind of what did you learn there that maybe you kind of brought across when you created Unraid?
Well, for sure is that hard drives are unreliable. If you lose a hard drive, it depends on how diligent you are with backups, but honestly, there's gaps in when you do backups. And so if you lose a hard drive, you've lost a lot, not only the data, but also time to recreate from somewhere. So yeah, hard drives, and plus they're expensive, during the 90s and the 2000s, early 2000s, they're pretty expensive still. The first Unraid prototypes I was using these white label hard drives, and I don't know if they even produce white label hard drives anymore, but they would literally put a white label over the manufacturer and all that, and they were just sold cheaply. So I don't know where they came from, back of a truck or whatever they were, but they were cheap, but also unreliable. So it needed some kind of RAID technology.
The company Maxstrat, did it get bought by Sun Micros?
Yeah, 99, it was bought by Sun Micro. Sun wanted to get into high performance computing, storage, and that was at the beginning of technology called SAN, storage area networks. That was all the rave back in those days. Yeah.
Yeah. One thing I saw before the podcast, kind of tried to research a little bit about Maxstrat, and couldn't find a lot of information, to be honest. But I thought it was kind of a really kind of peculiar sort of kind of full circle narrative that unfolded. Is you worked for Maxstrat, and then they were acquired by Sun Microsystems, who actually developed, as probably most of the audience already know, they developed the ZFS file system. So, fast forward today, and ZFS has woven itself into the Unraid storage stack. While there's no direct actual linkage between your time at Maxstrat and ZFS coming into Unraid, it's kind of like a cool and intriguing technical tapestry, don't you think? I just wondered if you can share your feelings about witnessing these kind of two separate paths kind of converging in an unexpected manner as they have.
Well, I guess it was inevitable. In my time at Sun, I was working for a network storage division, and right down the hall were the Solaris guys, and it was at the beginning of them developing ZFS. It wasn't a official thing at those days yet, but ZFS has advantages and disadvantages. Right now is, I think, a great time, because where it's going to really shine in an Unraid server environment is going to be with SSD devices, the solid state, NVMe, because it requires, if you use it in a disk array, it requires all your drives spun up all the time. So if you have large disk arrays, well, a lot of people are very energy conscious, especially over where you are in the EU, in the UK.
Yeah, it's very expensive.
And so, yeah, it's not necessarily ideal for a home user or even a small business if you have to always have your drive spun up. But if you want to manage large SSD type arrays, it's really good. So that's where I think it's going to really find its niche in Unraid, is in that capacity. And you'll use the traditional Unraid array with parity as like really longer term mass storage of, really high density hard drives. Yeah. But it is interesting how it's sort of come full circle.
Regarding the solid state storage like SSDs and NVMEs, do you think that, ZFS has got an advantage over, say, ButterFS? Similar type of file system?
It's certainly more mature, and there are a lot more knobs to turn and to improve performance. ButterFS has some advantages too. It's simpler. I have to say, ButterFS, anybody who's used it, you know that it's used a certain way. And for example, their RAID 5 and 6 implementation is kind of stagnated. They never really, made that bulletproof. So in that regard, ZFS has big advantages, I think. And by the way, between yourself and a few other people that work for us in the UK and the EU, I'm going to be calling it ZFS pretty soon. In Canada. Yeah.
I think as I call it ZFS now. I'm so used to saying that.
Are you? Okay. So you're turning over to the dark side then.
So yeah, I've swapped to Z and you swapped to Z.
All right.
Cool. Anyway, I don't really want to talk too much about present day Unraid quite yet. So if we can kind of loop back
to
the beginning of the company. I've heard snippets before about Unraid being born out of something you wanted to create for yourself for your own personal needs. But I wondered, can you share what actually sparked the initial idea? And perhaps, what solutions were you actually using before you created Unraid that just didn't quite hit the mark for you?
So I worked at Sun from 99 to 2001, then another startup for a couple of years. And then by around 2004 or so, I was mainly just sitting at home. But in those days, that was right when high definition TVs were really starting to come out. And a couple other things happened. So I had a large DVD collection, and all of a sudden now there's media server software you can run on a PC, and you could copy DVDs to your hard drive and play it from your computer onto your high definition TV. And so I started doing that. And it takes, you spend a lot of hours moving your DVD collection to hard drives, and pretty soon you realize, well, okay, yeah, if a hard drive fails, again, I was using these white label drives. If a hard drive fails, okay, I got my collection still, but what about all those hours spent ripping, So I got to work. I wanted to create a RAID 5 type system, some kind of parity protection, but I already had a bunch of devices, hard drives that had data on them. I didn't want to restripe them. So I thought, okay, I'm just going to add parity, and we'll do block level parity across all the devices. And so each disk itself would still be its own file system. And then I realized there's a lot of advantages of that, because also at the same time, gig Ethernet was starting to come out, but the hard drives were fast enough to keep up. Okay. So there was really no need to stripe. But you could stripe, but there was no point, because you couldn't feed it out of your network interface any faster. So it was just fine to store video and pictures and everything else on one hard drive, and the speed of the hard drive was enough to play back flawlessly, right? So that's how Unraid was born. So I figured out, I had a little experience with Linux, but not really doing any kind of like driver development. So I got a hold of Linux, and it was version 2.4 in those days. There was a driver already called MD, which implemented RAID 5 and RAID 1. And so I looked at that and learned how the block layer worked in Linux. And I took that as a starting point, that driver, and created an Unraid version. So that's where that came from. Okay, so the term Unraid, hopefully I don't get sued for this, but it came from the old 7-Up commercials of like the 70s and 80s. They called themselves the Uncola, right? And so this was a RAID array, but it wasn't RAID 5, wasn't RAID 1. There wasn't really a RAID level for it, so I called it Unraid. Okay, that's where that came from. Then one day, my son, he was learning how some of this computer stuff worked, and he thought it was pretty cool. And he said, "Hey, Dad, I think you should try to sell this to other people, see if, because other people might want to do this." I said, "Okay," and so I decided, all right, I need to form an LLC, which is what I did. And so to come up with the name is kind of hard. So I was living on Lime Drive. So that's where that came from. Lime technology came from Lime Drive. That's it. Real creative, right? So that's why we've got different people now doing the creative stuff, like Tiffany over here and a few others. Yeah. So that's where that came from. I was living on Lime Drive.
That's really interesting. And just going back to you saying about that you had a lot of data already on the hard drives.
Yeah.
And so you didn't want to actually have to empty the drives and recreate it. So
Correct.
Do you think if you didn't have had all of that data on the drives and someone had given you a bunch of brand new hard drives, maybe we would have not had that type of parity system in Unraid? It was just because of you having that data.
I would say it's more likely if I didn't have the data, I probably never would have done this to begin with.
I'm glad you did. Every invention, it always begins with some kind of prototype or a first draft.
Yeah.
So after you developed the kind of like initial Unraid, who were the first group of people to actually test it, and what was their feedback?
So one of the first users was a fellow named Joel on the forums. He's no longer active on the forums, but he wrote a lot of the early scripts, a lot of early utilities for Unraid, and one of them is Preclear, and I think it's still in use today in some form. Initially, Unraid was just an array of hard drives, and each disk 1, disk 2, again, not a real imaginative name, but they showed up as network shares. And then after a while, people, said, well, hey, it'd be nice to have like a unified name called movies, for example, or pictures, and it just showed everything on the array. And so got to work creating what's called now the user share file system. It's just basically a union file system. And so that was from feedback of the community. And it's something I wanted to. A lot of the features in Unraid are there because I wanted to use them. Then one disadvantage with the Unraid organization is that because data's not striped, as you write, you always have to modify 2 devices in parallel. Your target data disk, plus you have to update parity. And so writes tend to be slower than reads. In fact, quite a bit. Like they're maybe around 30 to 40% the speed of reads. Okay. And So for that reason, as networks got faster, it became desirable to be able to transfer data to the server faster than the hard drives could keep up writing. So that's where we came up with this idea of a cache drive. It's called just a single device to receive the data. And then later we would move it to the array at a time when your system was quiet, like at 3 a.m, for example. So that also was in response to people with faster networks and wanted to get the data to the array faster. I'd say virtually every feature in Unraid is the genesis was from a user that requested it, or a set of users, and hey, this looks like it'd be a pretty popular thing to add. And even ZFS, at the present day, there's a lot of people that want to use it. And so yeah, let's do it.
Anyway, switching gears a little bit, Tom, I'm particularly interested in how your company in the early days, you were also building and shipping servers.
All right.
When did you actually decide to switch away from that and just only focus on developing the OS? And when did that happen?
Yeah, okay, so I looked it up, and the first server was shipped in September of 2005. And I remember that well. It was the very first server product was a full tower case. It had wheels and is a whole bunch of IDE hard drives, 12 of them. And the box, the whole thing weighed in the shipping box something like 95 pounds. And anyway, sold several of those. And
what's the one thing you forgot, though, when you were shipping that first server?
Yeah, the very first server went out, I forgot the power cords. So I had to FedEx the power cords to the guy. Since then, I implemented manufacturing testing and checklists and all that, Unraid was, sold as, I never did it just a software product. It was always a server, various forms of server. We had something called starter kit, which was just a motherboard, the disk controllers, and the flash device, and the processor and memory. And that was it. Everything you need now, all I had to do was install that in a case. So that was a pretty popular product for a while. And then we also sold pre-configured flash devices where we just put Unraid already on it, so you didn't have to mess with that. It just would boot right up. So we built servers up until September. The last one went out September of 2015. And over that time was several hundred servers. And I built almost all of them myself. And 2015 was kind of a pivotal year. I guess we'll get to that, but it was a pivotal year for the company. And it was clear, we have to decide, are we going to be a hardware company building these servers, or are we going to just concentrate on the software and make that easy for people? And so, as you know, we chose the latter path. And that was just so we could focus more on the software. Because building servers is time consuming, and dealing with not only building them, shipping them, returns, replacements, there's a lot to it. Procuring the parts to begin with.
Reflecting on the remarkable evolution of Unraid since its start, did you ever kind of anticipate during those early foundational stages that you were shaping one of the future leaders in NAS solutions?
No way.
Also, kind of on the back of that, how did Unraid manage to adeptly pivot incorporating functions such as virtualization and Docker containerization? What drove that expansion? During that phase, were there any kind of significant hurdles that were very difficult to get over?
So 2015, that was a pivotal year. So before that, what I would tell people is I'm doing this mainly for beer money. I wasn't making a huge amount of money selling servers. We tried to be, there was no huge profit margins or anything. It was, I wouldn't say it was a hobby. It wasn't a hobby because, it was something I was doing full time, but it wasn't really, I wasn't trying to build something that would be sold for millions of dollars or something like that. I wasn't trying to do that. We don't have any VC. To this day, there's no outside funding. There's no, venture capital, anything like that right now. In 2015, however, well, actually a little before that, in 2014, that time frame, got to a point where I needed to make a decision. Are we going to keep going the way it is? And, there's other competitors coming along. There's other storage solutions, or are we going to try to make this into a growing business? And so I thought, okay, well, let's try to make it a business. And hired my first employee, who was a marketing gentleman. So in 2015, we incorporated as a corporation, really got to work looking at what's the future of the product going to be? What do they want? And the first thing was people wanted to run apps, a way to run some kind of apps on the server itself, because what was happening was server hardware itself, motherboards, processors, RAM, all that not only was it, staying inexpensive, but it was getting very powerful, way more powerful than you need just to have network storage. Okay. So we decided, all right, how can we make use of this processing power? And so the first idea was to implement virtual machines, because Docker wasn't around quite yet. Maybe it was starting, but it wasn't really something big yet. But virtual machines were. And so the first virtual machine implementation for Unraid was actually Zen. The idea behind that was that you could have individual virtual machines. Each one would be tailored for a specific application. So if you wanted to run like a media server VM, that would be a VM. If you wanted to run a backup server, that would be another VM. Okay, so that was sort of the idea that each kind of app, what we know as app now, would be its own VM. And so that went along, and we worked on that during basically 2015 or so. And it became evident that as Linux itself was evolving, that KVM was really a better solution. So totally switch gears. There's still some vestiges of Zen. So like the share that we use to store virtual machines is called domains. That's a Zen term.
Yeah.
That's where that came from. And so we just kept that, just maintain compatibility. So yeah, we shifted gears, and then all of a sudden people in the community, started talking about Docker. So the KVM VM implementation was working, and we sort of shifted gears and integrated Docker and realized that, okay, this is a really good for lighter weight apps, because VMs, you do a lot with VM. You can have Windows VM, Mac OS VM if you want. So Docker looked like a good choice to run individual apps. And not only that, to be able to leverage what other people do. If other people have an app they want to run on the server, then Docker is the way to do it. And so that was also around 2015 or so, 2016 is when we did that. Yeah. So that's where it came from. Again, it was, the community and myself, wanting to, I see this hardware, and you look at the load on it doing parity syncs and all that, load is like 5%. And you think, okay, what else can we do here?
It's a great testament, Tom, to how you listen to the community, saying that community was talking about Docker and you implemented it into Unraid.
Yeah.
But speaking of VMs and speaking of milestones, 2015 was quite a pivotal year for Unraid, I believe. The visibility of Unraid skyrocketed when you got featured on Linus Tech Tips.
Yeah.
Especially the video, 2 gamers, 1 CPU, then later the 7 gamers, 1 CPU.
Yeah.
I was wondering, how did that collaboration come about, and how did those videos on Linus's channel impact the trajectory of Lime Technology?
Like I mentioned before, I'd hired a guy to do some marketing for us, and he was sending out emails just to any influencers he could, kind of like cold emails saying, hey, here's this product and we want to get featured on your channel and that kind of thing. And him and a couple other people that we had on the team finally got a reply from Linus. And so the other bit of technology that was happening right then, by the way, was something called GPU Passthrough. And that was the ability to take a physical graphics card in your host server and basically pass it completely through to a VM, so that that virtual machine had direct access to the hardware of that graphics card. Okay. And there was some work done by a guy at Red Hat to make that possible. And so we integrated that, and we were able to do this GPU pass-through, and that caught the attention of Linus. And I'm very grateful to this day for Linus. He was instrumental, in those days. We put together, with his help, put together a server that did exactly that. Had a couple graphics cards, 1 server, and he was able to produce that video around it. And yeah, it was like amazing, the visibility. And it changed my mind about how video marketing, YouTube marketing, how that works. It's phenomenal. That was an awesome time right at the end of 2015 and into 2016. Yeah.
So kind of navigating through the rapid growth that obviously came from after those videos coming out, and obviously a lot more people being exposed to Unraid. You've expanded the team and rebranded. Can you touch on any key milestones and hires during this kind of phase?
People may not realize this, but Tom is actually my dad. So I've been around this business for a long time as well, though not as involved until, the last couple of years here. In 2018, I was working at a design agency as their producer, and my dad and I talk all the time, and I was, learning about how much this business was growing and expanding and all the awesome things that were happening. And I said, Unraid could really use a logo, and Unraid could really use a brand that's not clip art sliced limes.
Yeah, my brother-in-law, or not my brother, my brother, when he saw our old Lime Tech logo, he goes, "Tom, are you in the grocery business?" Anyway.
And so I finally convinced my dad, hey, come to this agency. I will produce, I will be the producer on the project. Let's get some messaging. Let's get some branding. Let's get a website. Let's get, let's make this more official. And so he said, all right. So I think that started early 2018. And kind of the joke was, at the time I was pregnant and I was due at the end of August of 2018. And so the joke was, we have to get this all launched before
the other launch,
before I launch a baby.
Yeah.
So he came in, and it was really amazing to be able to kind of usher Unraid into that next era. And I learned a lot more about the company at that time. And I was also working, another person who was there at the agency with me was a guy named Zach Spear, who is now our senior front-end developer on the team. And so he actually built the website. And after he ended up leaving that agency, my dad called and said, hey, you think I could snag Zach? Think he'd come work for us? I said, yeah, let's do it. So he brought Zach on a couple of years, or maybe a year after that, 2019-ish. I think it was like January 2019. Mm-hmm. And then a couple months later, my dad reached out to Spencer, who is our marketing communications manager and also my husband, and said, hey, can you come he started off as a community manager, and be our liaison between the community and us. Because as a result of so much growth, our community was just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And that gap between, my dad and the community was getting bigger. And we didn't want that to happen. We wanted to have a good line of communication because it's so important to this company's history and our future. And so Spencer came on in 2019, and that was really a huge moment. So between having a new website, a brand, a logo, a dedicated person liaising with the community, a front-end developer, and all these people coming into the mix, things started to really even ramp up even more.
Right.
And then later in 2019, I came on as a consultant to start streamlining operations inside the company. And, that has evolved over time to now us really working in partnership, leading this company where he handles, mostly on the tech side and I'm on all the other side, operations, marketing, people. And since that time, we've brought on, I think I counted 6 people between 2019 and now, which is full-time employees. So we have Eli, who came on a little over a year ago to manage all of our cloud services. Brought on Justin. He's our DevOps engineer. He came on about 6 months ago.
If I can just stop you for one moment.
Yeah.
For people, I'm sure some of the guys watching, they don't actually know what DevOps is. Can you, what is DevOps?
He's mainly responsible for actually running our cloud services that we need for the business. For example, we have a server that we call Key Server. He and Eli work on that. These days is mainly Eli, but other DevOps would be, backups, managing where our downloads are stored.
Getting staging environments set up.
Right. Dealing with forum updates. All those types of projects is what Justin's doing right now. And I don't know, maybe you'll ask this, but something to point out is we're fully remote company and always have been. We're a remote company before it was a thing to be a remote company.
Before it was in vogue.
And so, for example, Justin's in Sweden, Eli is in Virginia, I'm in San Diego, Tiffany and Spencer are up in Oceanside, Zach's in Oregon, Larry is in Arizona, Ed here is in the UK. We've got other developers in the Netherlands, Austria, Norway, Portugal, Canada, Texas. So that's the other part of DevOps is, having things so that we can communicate amongst each other when we need to across time zones. And so that's been pretty interesting, learning how to deal with all this. And, there's a lot more tools now available for remote work, but yeah, we already had a lot of that figured out before it was a thing.
If you want to carry on with the, what other staff members you took on and what their roles were?
Yeah. So we brought Larry on. He was before Eli, kind of in the timeline here, but Larry, one of also the unique things to mention about pretty much every single one of our hires is they came from the community. So you guys all out there, you probably have interacted with Larry, LJM42. That's how we, it's funny, we have to go between real names and forum handles for people out there. So instead of calling him Andrew, we all just call him Squid at this point.
Yeah, Squid.
But anyway, so Larry's been out there for a long time, and it's really cool to actually have that because you can kind of look back on a person's history and go, oh, okay, like they're an amazing community member. They have a good, they haven't gone off on anybody.
Yeah, there hasn't been any swearing. They haven't,
Maybe in some DMs or something, but so Larry came on, and Larry has really become your right-hand man in producing OS releases and testing and managing the OS development team, and really great person to work with. He came from Cisco.
Yeah.
And then the last person I want to hire bring up is someone we hired they started 3 days ago as of this recording. His name is Adam. He actually comes to us from IX Systems. And he built up their customer success team there. So he handled all of their operations. He was in their QA department for a while, and he was there for about 8 years. And so we brought him onto our team. And the reason why we brought this person on is, you can imagine as our community has grown and we're selling more and more licenses, the support needs have really grown too. And something that I'm really big on is making sure that our customers feel really taken care of, they feel heard, and that customer support needs to be, really high level. And so we wanted to bring Adam on to head up that department. Spencer has really kind of been the person spearheading that department, but he wears a lot of hats and he's getting spread pretty thin. And so we felt like the timing was really right to bring Adam on. And so we're really excited to see what he's going to do. And Ed, I definitely want to get him on the podcast with you too.
Yeah.
He'll love to talk shop with you.
And one thing Adam brings too is a deep knowledge and experience of ZFS. So we feel like, that's going to be very valuable to help us avoid maybe some pitfalls. And, what's really important to implement ZFS is huge. It's an enterprise level file system and storage management software. And there's a lot of things you can do with it, but what is really necessary? And so I think he's going to be very helpful in helping us sort that out at a faster rate.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So he's a great fit for the company for sure.
Yeah.
He's in, where's
Tennessee.
That? Tennessee.
Mm-hmm.
Tennessee.
Right. So, talking about kind of hires, when you're expanding your team, what are the key attributes you look for when expanding out your team?
Well, number one is we look to our community. We look for people who already have used Unraid. Everybody that we've hired is in that category, basically, right?
Yeah.
From time to time, projects come up, and one of the things we want to do in the future more is have a way to officially say, hey, we have this little project we want someone to do, and post it on the forum, and let people be compensated for their work. So that's something that we want to look towards in the future. And community is where we go for everything. And I guess they're listening to this right now, so a big thank you to everybody. And Unraid would definitely not be possible without the community. And when I say that, the forum, Discord now, even Reddit, Facebook groups. There's
other Discord servers.
Yes. And right. Our primary goal has always been to try to keep our community friendly, keep it very, really help new people out. There's no dumb questions. A lot of times in tech, you can get people will say, well, why don't you try a search first in the forum? Well, it's not perfect. Every community is, there's always things and things fall through the cracks, and I don't always see everything in the forum. But I think for the most part, we have a good reputation of having, one of the best communities out there for this kind of a storage product. And so we're very, I'm the most proud of that. The software, people could replicate it. It's not rocket science. People could replicate it, but our community is really what's most important.
Yeah, I think we've got a really great community. It's a very friendly forum. So often, like you say, Tom, new people can post on all sorts of forums, and like you say, people are just like horrible to and then we all kind of started not knowing anything. So people need to remember that, and I think our community is very sensitive.
And our moderators are great. There's been mistakes. There's been some people that maybe weren't treated the way they thought they should be, but our moderators are awesome. So
there's zero tolerance for being an a-hole. I don't know if we cuss on this podcast, but there's no tolerance for that. And Spencer's really, that has been the ethos the whole time. And then Spencer has really, made sure that has been enforced across the board, even in, private support tickets that come in. It's just not tolerated to be jerks. We bend over backwards as much as we can to help. I hope people don't think we're just these greedy guys, and we're not. We try to do anything we can to help people out. That's all.
When did you guys start kind of putting Unraid into other languages as well? Because that's quite a recent thing as well, isn't it? Like, I believe, Chinese, German, there's translations of the documentation website, that kind of thing. When did you start?
When was that?
That was a Spencer initiative.
Spencer and Ronald.
Yeah, I was like 2019, 2020. It was kind of one of his first big projects where it's like, it'd be really great to localize the product, and, worked internally on that. But then, almost all the translations, not every single one, but almost all of them and ongoing are community supported. They're done by the community, just like a lot of things with Unraid.
Well, the story that happened there was the developer of the implementation of multiple languages within our management interface, our web GUI, is Ronald, who has done a lot of work for us. And
Bonnie NL.
Yeah. And he lives in the Netherlands. This task has been out there. We knew we wanted to do it, and I was within, I don't know, a week or two of publishing sort of the next release. It was a fairly major Unraid OS. I don't remember the exact version number, but all of a sudden, here's this massive PR on GitHub. Ronald, okay, here's multiple language support. I'm like, what? Okay. So I merged it, and I go, well, how hard could it be? So I merged it, and it only delayed the release maybe a month, and but we got it in, and it was an awesome piece of work. And then Spencer, he went to town, setting up different repos, GitHub repos for each of the languages, recruiting people to start doing translation. And to this day.
Mm-hmm. And then on the website, so we created a localized version of the website in many languages. It's a little bit pared down, but still you can look at the website in your language. And same with the docs. So something that we're actively working on right now, if you've gone to docs.unraid.net recently, you'll notice it has a whole new look. And Larry is working with a consultant, and we are going through our documentation and updating it, not only in the content that's there, but also in breaking it into smaller chunks and call outs and just making it a better experience. And so that's ongoing as things get updated. Those are getting published. And then once we kind of get through this big round of updating, which should be wrapping up in the next couple of months, so probably by the end of November or so, then we will go through and localize all of those as well in the updates.
So even that fellow, who's working with Larry, he was from the community, right?
Yeah. He was a new Unraid user and
he
reached
says,
out.
hey, I'm a technical writer. I got some time.
Yeah.
You guys, your documentation's a little lacking.
Yeah.
And we said, you're hired.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
And that's been going really well. Shout out to Paul.
So, with kind of new hires and stuff and expanding, obviously that all costs money. So I think it's just kind of maybe quite a good segue to discuss something that is coming up fairly soon. It's always interesting to hear how businesses adapt and evolve. So looking at the future of Unraid, I've heard that there is a pricing change coming for people who will be buying new licenses going forward. What prompted this decision? I think it's fairly obvious, but I'm going to ask that question anyway. And what can current Unraid users and future customers expect in terms of this new pricing structure? And what is this new pricing structure going to look like?
Okay, well, our pricing structure, the way it is we currently are selling 3 versions of a license key. It's Basic, Plus, and Pro. And the only thing different between them is how many devices are supported, storage devices. And the idea behind that was it was designed to match your hardware investment. So if you just bought, a small, cheap motherboard and you just have, 4, 5, 6 devices, okay, you don't have much of a hardware investment, so you just get a basic key. You move up to maybe, a tower, a mid tower, or maybe a small rack mount, something like that. And you have a more substantial investment. You have, a more powerful motherboard, more RAM. Okay. So now you need a plus key. All right. Well, you have a really big system, lots of hard drives, lots of SSDs. You've got, several $1,000s at least in your hardware investment. Okay, Pro is what you need. And that's just unlimited. You don't have to worry about device limits. So that's how it's always been. Our pricing has hardly changed at all over the years. It's been tweaks here and there, different sales here and there. The other feature that the pricing has is it's a one-time purchase, right? You get your key and that's it. You never have to purchase another upgrade or anything. And you could upgrade between levels, so you can go from basic to plus, basic to pro, et cetera. So that model served us well. It's sort of the one that when I first started with Lime Technology, first created Unraid and started selling it, that's how I wanted it to be. I just, again, getting back to just, we're not trying to like extract as much cash as possible from people. It's just, here's this product, if you got it, it'll support the development. And it was fine. All right. But fast forward now, and as we've just talked about, we've hired several people, especially professionals, people who take it really seriously, and it's not a hobby business in any shape or form. So we've come to realize that these days, a company really needs some kind of recurring revenue stream. That's really what you need in order to sustain continued growth. So that's what we're doing. We're going to introduce new key types. And the idea is that you'll make a one-time purchase of your key. The difference is after you've purchased a license key, you can go and get all the updates for Unraid OS as long as you want. But after 1 year, no more updates. So beyond that point, if you want to continue getting updates related to the server running that key, then you have an update fee, which is, it's going to be somewhere around 50% the purchase price. So every year you'll have this recurring charge if you want to keep getting Unraid OS updates. So one way,
if you didn't want to update, the key continues working.
Yeah, right. So it's not like a SaaS product. You don't want to update the key anymore. Okay, it's just stuck on the latest release of Unraid OS that will run with that key, and we don't do anything. We won't limit your data. We don't lock you out of your data. Nothing like that. It's just merely whether you're eligible to get updates, future updates. And even if you, let's say you lapse, so maybe you purchase a key and then you over the course of a year, you maybe update once or twice, and you're happy with the release that's running, and your anniversary comes up, and you say, okay, I'm not going to get any more updates. It's fine. And so you just keep running. Maybe 6 months later, here we are. We've created a release that has some feature that you want. Okay, or maybe a critical security, something like that. And you say, all right, I want to get this. So we're not going to charge you for the time you missed. Nothing like that.
You're not penalized.
You're not penalized. Okay, you get the renewal fee. All right, now you get another year. So again, we're trying to, I want it to be the way I want it. If I was a customer, how would I want this to be? And that's the way we look at it. At the same time, there's a lot of things that we want to do. We just don't have the resources. And I'm not going to go out and go find venture capital, and we're not really interested in doing that. We want to be community driven, community supported. So this having a recurring revenue stream like this will help us grow and create the features that we want to create down the road, hire more developers, basically.
Oh, I'm going to add a few things too, in terms of what you were just saying about resourcing. It's what it really is that if we continue in the model that we're in right now, which is a one-time fee and forever updates, and we're forever supporting you in your, support ticketing and all that kind of stuff, our money, the money that we're making as a company, it has to go towards marketing. A huge chunk of our funds have to go towards marketing because we're constantly needing to bring new customers in. And that we can do that, but it's kind of a bummer because I personally, and I think the team agrees, that I would much rather be investing that money back into the company and back into our customers' experience. And being able to bring new developers on, or being able to do different projects that we're going to get into in a little bit about, what we want to do in the future, what we want to see. And if we keep having to be on this hamster wheel of continually having to bring in new customers all the time, it's just kind of stressful, and it's not very fun. And so we want to be able to switch our resource allocation back into the company and into the product. And, this decision, this new pricing model, we have been working on it literally for years and years. It's been talked about. We've known that this had to happen. We have had multiple offsites discussing this. Last year we brought in an agency to consult with us, and we went through we dedicated a significant amount of resources and time and money to go through a months-long process of analyzing the company up until then. We did one-on-one interviews with different users, with people in our community. We put out a customer survey that, thank you to everyone who answered that, by the way. It was incredibly helpful to hear everybody's voices and hear what you guys want. I think nearly 5,000 people responded to that survey, which was really cool, and I hope to do more of those. And we've really, really done our due diligence. We've gone down so many different paths of, looking at different companies and how they've implemented recurring revenue stream. And a lot of things didn't feel right to us. It didn't feel right to limit features. It didn't feel right to just charge in ways that was going to just kind of make it annoying for the customer. We wanted you to fully experience the product.
And a big one, we don't want it to be a requirement that your server be online on the internet to validate a license key. So we're still tying the license to your USB device, your boot device. We're still doing that. Someday in the future, maybe that'll be augmented, but for the near future here, it's still tied to your flash device. There's no phone home. A trial still has a phone home, but it always has had a phone home just to validate your trial period. Again, we're very sensitive to the voices in the community. Also, I'll say this, anybody that currently has a key already, a Basic Plus Pro, they're, I guess, what's the term,
grandfathered in, yeah.
Yeah, nothing changes. All of a sudden, we're not going to say, hey, you guys have to pony up more money. No way. And we're not doing that at all. Everything will work exactly the same. We'll provide upgrade paths. If you have a basic, even after we announce these new keys, you can still upgrade your basic key to a plus key or to a pro key. We're still going to do that, still offer that option. I think we'll offer, if you have a basic key, we'll offer a way to upgrade to a new key that has unlimited devices. So again, we're trying to do this, if I am a user, I'm a customer, how would I like to see this proceed? Is where we're trying to go.
There's two other big keys that I want to, or big points I want to bring up too. One is, you guys will all be very happy about this, that actually prices are going to go down, which is exciting for you all out there. A little nerve-wracking for us in here, but we feel good about it. And then my dad mentioned this already, but the annual fee to receive updates is optional. That's going to be an optional fee that you can choose not to pay, and that's okay. And you still own a perpetual copy of the license. So we really tried to hold on to the things that we heard from the community were really important to them, bake that into it, and also look at it from a business perspective to make sure that we can stay around for a very long time. And also make sure that we can be able to recruit great talent, keep great talent that we have on our team right now, pay them a great salary, give great benefits. We are incredibly generous to our employees, and we wanted to keep that going. So there were a lot of things we had to consider in this, and doing this podcast episode is part of that. So we wanted to make sure that you guys knew who we were. We wanted to make sure you guys understood why we're doing this, understood that we have taken the utmost care in making all of these decisions. And we hope that you guys understand where we're coming from, and that, if we're not meeting your expectations, let us know and we'll see what we can do about that. Is there anything else you would add to that?
Well, I guess not. I think we've covered it all. It's really I don't think it's a huge change operationally.
Oh, I realized one thing I did want to say.
What's that?
So if you are listening to this right now, dear listener, and you are in a trial of Unraid, it's very important that you understand that this change will be coming. And by the time this goes out, we'll have a firm date that'll be in the show notes of this. And this podcast will be a part of a blog post and be circulated widely. But if you are in a trial, there is a decision point that is going to need to be made, whether you purchase now in the quote unquote, old or current model, or into the new one. And that is something that that was a huge point of debate internally is, we're going to make this switch one day, and there's going to be a huge handful of people who are in trials. And we did not, we're trying to move through this with the utmost integrity. And we didn't want to just pull the rug out from people who had maybe already researched, already knew the pricing, already knew what they were getting themselves into. And then they go to actually buy and whoa, everything's different. So if you're listening to this and you're in a trial and the pricing has not changed yet and you want to be in the older model, that's totally fine. Please, go ahead and do that. That was one thing that I really wanted to make sure people knew.
Right.
Also, it sounds actually really good. Existing users, all the people listening who have already got their Unraid licenses, nothing's going to change. That's really cool. I think it's commendable how you guys are grandfathering in everyone who's already got a license. Very true to your word when people bought it. As you know, it's 100% true. And the fact as well, like you mentioned, Tiffany, that people can actually buy a license for cheaper than what they used to be. So new users are going to be able to get into the Unraid world for less money. Everyone likes that. And I think as well, the flexibility of being able to choose if you want an update is really great. Some people, they might just kind of buy the license at a cheaper price and they're quite happy with just the features they've got. They're not interested in other features. They might just want the server sitting in under the stairs, just, as a basic file server, and they don't want any more updates. So that's going to be cheaper for them. But if there is a feature you like, you can think, oh, great. Okay, I want to have that. So you buy the feature. And I think because of that, it's going to be quite a user-centric development, because obviously the company, I'm sure, is going to want people to want the updates. So you're going to have to listen a lot to what the users want if you want people to actually update. And I think that is going to be a really, really good thing for all of us users.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because the recurring revenue will depend on if people want the features that are coming.
Correct.
So I think that's really awesome. And new users, they're going to have the security knowing that Unraid isn't going anywhere, that it's got its sustainability and it's going to be there for the long haul. And, I think the way basically you guys have done this and the structuring, I think it's really awesome. It's very well thought through, and I think it's very fair. And I think it's very exciting as well, to be honest, to sort of see where Unraid and Lime technology can go with a sustainable funding method, that you're not having to just throw money into marketing all the time to constantly be chasing the next person to sign up for a lifetime license.
Exactly. And, there's been a lot of even work behind the scenes to launch all of this. And so we're all getting very excited to get this out into the wild and be able to shift back into, development mode and not new model mode. So that might actually be a good segue if you want to talk a little bit about the other kind of exciting announcement coming out, which is Unraid 7.
Okay, Tom. So Unraid 7, hey? Can you tease us a bit or give us some sneak peeks into some of the enhancements we might anticipate in 7?
Sure. So right now, as I'm recording the podcast, the current stable release is the 6.12 series. And we're working on 6.13. Like I mentioned, we're fully remote, so we have a way of passing around releases to all the developers. And so 6.13 right now is in our sort of internal alpha or beta stage. And probably the main chunk of work in the OS itself is the ZFS implementation. Okay, so what we decided to do, since there's a lot of changes coming, the pricing model, there's a website coming, our support system, our customer support is going to be totally revamped. Anyway, it seemed natural to retire Unraid 6, and so the next release after Unraid 6.12 series will be Unraid 7. Several key features in there. The primary one is going to be a more complete ZFS implementation. We'll implement so-called hybrid pools natively. Also, the OpenZFS project is going to be itself having some great new features that the ZFS community has wanted a long time. For example, being able to expand a Z pool.
That's huge, isn't it?
Yeah.
That is so huge.
That'll be huge. And so that's also something that we're working on integrating. It'll come in, we'll see if it gets into Unraid 7.0, but definitely it'll be 7.1, 7.2 as the evolution of Unraid OS itself continues. Then we'll just keep adding and supporting what the community wants from our ZFS implementation is mainly how we're going to approach this. Also, another feature coming in Unraid 7 is what a lot of other people want too, is multiple Unraid arrays.
Oh, wow.
So for people that have
that makes me really happy.
Okay. So we're going to do that. And in terms of implementation, what we're going to end up doing is everything's going to be a pool. So at present time, you want to create a new pool, you click a button and you say, okay, how many slots, which is how many devices will be in a pool, and then you create it, and then you can create a file system type, et cetera. So one of the types of pools you'll be able to create will be an Unraid data organization style pool. And so we'll be able to have multiple of those along with multiple ZFS pools, multiple Btrfs pools. Along with that, our mover will be augmented. You'll be able to move from pool to pool.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah. So good stuff there. We've integrated.
Could I ask you?
Sure.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Tom. Can I ask you a question about the Unraid arrays? If someone didn't want to actually have any of the original type of Unraid arrays as pools, could they just have a ZFS or Btrfs pool and no other pools at all?
Yes, that's also slated for Unraid 7. In fact, that'll probably be in Unraid 7.0 when we release. We'll lift that requirement to have Unraid array itself. Yes.
Yeah. One of my servers presently, my full kind of ZFS server, I used actually Squid told me about it in a podcast with him.
Yeah.
He said, you can always use a flash drive as the one driver. Really? Can you? So I think I've got something like a 4 gig flash drive as my Unraid array in one of my servers.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's great that,
Yeah, we'll lift that requirement, sure. Okay, other features in the OS itself, where we've integrated BonnieNL's file manager plugin. So some plugins, what we're sort of over time, some of the plugins we're integrating into the OS itself. The implication for that is that us, Linus Tech as a company, we maintain that software. So we're integrating the file manager plugin. Another person has integrated VM snapshots and VM cloning, another feature that people have asked for. So that's also coming. That's in beta right now. Our own Squid has integrated a plugin that is called Web GUI Search. So you can, if you don't know where a particular setting is at, there's a box you type in auto trim, and it'll highlight everywhere in the Web GUI where that setting is provided. And it works.
That's super useful.
Not only that, it's multilingual too. And by the way, a few words about Andrew, aka Squid. He lives in Canada. He's the developer for our community apps plugin and curating the feed. And he is just a rock star. I just want to say that. So Andrew, if you're hearing this, you're a rock star, buddy.
Tom, could I just ask you one question about 7? I know
sure.
that the audience will probably be wondering, will we have a kernel that supports Intel Arc GPUs?
Oh yeah, absolutely. We're using in beta, we're using the 6.5 kernel. Well, I will say one word about with ZFS. So now that we've integrated OpenZFS, in some respects, we're kind of tied to them, meaning they're a little bit lagging in kernel support. So we can't upgrade the kernel until all the other subsystems used by Unraid OS support that kernel. And predominantly there is OpenZFS. So they just actually released, I guess, 2.1.13 as of this podcast, and that supports up to 6.5 kernel, and that's what we're using right now.
Right.
And I think they plan on going to 6.6 ultimately, which is, I think, the current RC in the Linux development. We always traditionally, we try to keep up with the latest kernels. Until we get to a long-term release, then we might linger there for a while, which I think the 6.12, Unraid 6.12 is on a long-term kernel. Those they're pretty stable. They get security updates, they get bug fixes. They don't get any new features, however. So as Unraid OS moves along, we try to keep up. And I'm always amazed by how fast kernel updates occur. It's pretty amazing, but yeah. So to answer your question, yes.
Are there any other projects or ideas in the Unraid universe that you're hoping to explore or bring to the community in the future, guys?
So a feature that I've wanted to have for a long time, I think we're finally going to get around to implementing, and that's, I call it the hardware database. Basically what that is, one of the questions we get a lot in not only in forums, but in support is, will my hardware work of Unraid? Okay. Or, because for different hardware products, there are quirks, and sometimes you have to add a kernel. For example, when you boot, you have to add a little kernel option to turn something on or off to get your hardware to work right, depending on how old it is, et cetera. So what I always thought would be very useful is a database where people voluntarily upload their hardware configuration, what motherboard they're using, the processor, anything you can think about in terms of their server hardware, the storage devices, all that, and let people, upload that information anonymously, and we will build up this database. And you'll be able to plug in your configuration and say, okay, a green check, everything's fine. Or maybe this will work, but you need to be aware of this, this, and this. I think that would be very useful, depending on how far we expand it and what kind of things we look for. It'll be very useful even outside the Unraid community. Down the road, we can include software components. For example, what hardware platforms are best at running certain VMs, right? We can gather statistics on, what's the most popular storage device out there, right? Which ones are being replaced the most? So this is honestly something that we should have done as a company a long time ago, but finally we have resources that we can dedicate to this. And so right after this website launch and the launch of Unraid 7, that's something that we really want to devote some resources to getting done. So outside really Unraid OS itself, right? But I think it'd be very useful.
Oh yeah, I can see that being super cool. Like if you're planning on kind of buying a new component, maybe new motherboard, new CPU, a new kind of Threadripper CPU that's not been released yet, you don't have to just post on the forum and hope someone comes across it and reads it and go, oh yeah, I've tried that and that was actually fine. To actually have a database and people be able to do that gives you a bit more confidence to actually go ahead and purchase something.
Right.
And know whether it's going to work or not.
Right. There's some fun things we could do too. We could, who's got the most terabytes, right? Who's got the most simultaneous VMs running? Who's got the most? Okay, Simon, who's been developing the VM clone and snapshot feature, he recently gave us a little demo, and he brings up his VM manager page, and he's got to scroll it to see all the VMs he's got and snapshots. So he might win that one, but yeah. So there's a lot of fun things you can do with this kind of information.
Yeah, I think the biggest pool I've ever seen in Unraid was Jason from Byte My Bits. I think he had 500 terabytes Btrfs pool in his Unraid server.
Oh, wow. That's impressive.
It made my little kind of like 60 terabyte array look very bad. I was pretty jealous.
Yeah, that's amazing. So other features, we've had this sort of a project going in the background that we've called Connect.
Formerly My Servers.
We want to expand that capability. One of the ideas behind that was for you to create something called a My Friends network, where you have your own servers, and maybe you've got some friends who've got servers in their own homes. It could be, your next door neighbor, or it could be someone in the States, right? Or maybe you're a small business, same thing. So it would be like a private network where you can make shares available to people within your My Friends network for purposes of backup, data sharing, that sort of thing. So we want to facilitate that. So that's one of the features we want to work on with Connect moving forward.
Could that be an encrypted data set? So if I stored some data on a friend's server, they wouldn't be able to access it, only I would be able to.
That's correct.
And vice versa. So we can kind of buy an 8 terabyte hard drive each. I put one in mine, and he puts one in his, and that's awesome. So yeah.
And you can choose to not have it encrypted. So you want to post up something that you want them to see. Yeah.
What we're trying to share here is, some of the great things that we're going to be able to do in the future going forward, now that we kind of have this pricing change behind us, or when it is behind us. It's just going to be really exciting for us. And one of the things that, Ed, you brought up on our list here that you were really excited about, that everybody always gets excited about when I mention it, is this, we're calling it the Uncon. So an unconference, basically. And, honestly, we haven't sat down and mapped this out, but, the idea is just to get everybody together in person, if possible, or maybe people can join virtually too. I don't know what we'll do at the Uncon. I don't know where it's going to be, but we think that one of the things we really want to try and do is just continue to build on the amazing community that we already have. And so, along with Unraid 7, along with the new pricing model, we're launching a whole new website. And there's going to be an awesome section of use cases. We already have a section of use cases on our website, but this is going to go even deeper. And success stories. So you can go there for inspiration, go there to figure out how people did a certain thing. It's going to be searchable, filterable, and we'll be continuing to add to that. And so that's something we're really excited about. There's going to be just more resources available for people to connect with one another. So the Uncon is kind of, the in-person extension of that. I'm hoping it can be, in the south of Spain or something, but, we'll see where it ends.
I was hoping Hawaii, but I think that's...
yeah, we could be Hawaii.
It's kind of isolated for everybody.
Yeah, kind of far. Yeah, another request that people have had over the years is just making the web GUI responsive. And so that's something that we want to be working on as well. There's a little project going on internally to start slowly be doing.
Yeah, so actually that could end up being a pretty big feature. In order to do that, we want to come up with something that we just call the Unraid API. So it'll be an API that anybody could use to write a mobile app or new web GUI if they wanted to, and make pretty much the entire server capability available through an API. So that's something else in the works.
That would be cool for things like Home Assistant as well.
Correct. And along those lines of Home Assistant. Yeah.
The other thing that I want to call out that was launched this year, again, by Spencer and has been growing and people have really enjoyed is the ability to book in a paid support session with members from our community, and Ed is one of them. That's not done. We facilitate it and we take a very small cut just to cover the costs of, the various software that we need and the infrastructure we need to run it. But you can go on our website right now and you can book a paid support session. The time of this recording, it's $150 US for an hour of someone's time. And I think, Ed, I don't know if it's happened. People have joked that they've just booked the time to, have a beer with you and hang out. You've been one of our most popular bookings on there. But there's other experts we list on there, what each person's sort of background and capabilities and expertise is in. So you can kind of choose. Again, going back to the multilingual aspect, there's a couple of different languages that are available, and that's also expanding. So that's something else that has gotten really great traction, and we want to keep going with that. Just to get people, I've read some Reddit threads about this, and there's kind of two camps. There's the camp of, oh, I've learned so much just figuring it out and, doing it myself. Like, I don't think I would do this. And other people are like, I ain't got time for that. I'm totally down to pay someone $150 and tell me exactly what to do here and solve my problem. So if you're in that camp, go check that out. So that's something that we're also excited to continue to be expanding. And like you said earlier, just better customer support, better pipeline between our customers and the product development itself. So, new features or requests or bugs or submitting, to the hardware database in the future. So just really making sure that as we grow and expand, that pipeline that has really been the foundation of this company, the community to our developers, does not get closed up. It's really, really, really important to us.
Something to say along those lines is this, that myself and other developers, we only see a fraction of everything that's posted out there in terms of forums, support. It's just a large volume. And so we rely on people such as yourself, other forum moderators. If there's, a real fire out there and people are going, hey man, you got to fix this problem. Well, I might not see it myself, but those guys, they bring it to our attention, then we'll jump on it. I've noticed just doing the 613, we're fixing some bugs that people have brought to my attention, our attention, that I didn't know about, going, yeah, that is pretty bad. How come I didn't know about this before? It's posted in the forum, but like I said, I just don't have the ability to see every single post out there. So we rely on that and try to be responsive as much as possible. When someone, a developer or a community member, moderator, community developer says, hey, you got to fix this, add this, then we'll try to do that.
Well, guys, wow, that's all I can say. It's been an incredibly insightful conversation.
Thank you very much for facilitating this and for putting this together. It's very much appreciated. And I'm sorry I haven't been on a podcast sooner. A lot of people went after me, Tom, when are you getting on a podcast? But you made it excellent, very easy. It's a lot of fun. And so thank you very much.
Yeah, and I also just want to express our gratitude really to you, Ed, to others who create videos, guides, content, our community in the forums, on YouTube, just everyone out there. It is incredible. It's like incredibly inspiring to see how much people not only love the product, but love helping other people. It's just like, I have to tell Larry all the time, I'm like, sign off, He's like, well, this person needs help. And, it's like, everybody cares so much, and it's really, really fun to be a part of a product that has created such a great community. So, we've said it multiple times, but we just really can't express our gratitude enough to all the listeners and all of our users out there. Thank you for being with us on this journey and for championing this change that we're about to go through. I hope it makes sense, and that, we are presenting a plan that is really honoring our users, current and future. So just thank you.
Your journey from the early days to the thriving community we've got now and the platform Unraid is today is really nothing short of inspiring. I've got to say, a real heartfelt thank you for sharing your time and giving us an enriched understanding and appreciation of what you and the team are actually building and how things are going to move forward in the future. And to all of our listeners out there, thank you very much, guys, for tuning in and spending your time with us. Tom, Tiffany, I tell you, cheering you and Unraid and the team on as you chart forward through these new territories. Again, thanks to the listeners. You're a vital part of this podcast. Thank you for listening. And to all of you guys, until next time, stay inspired, keep those gears turning, and I'll meet you in the next episode.